without further ado, I'd like to introduce another man. Now, I've known Glenn for a while, and I noticed there not too long ago that he had written a book. And this is something that's dear to my heart because he's written a book called Made to Parade. And the book, it refers to Glenn's experiences growing up as being in the marching bands. I mean, in Northern Ireland, there's a huge marching band fraternity, and they're linked to the Loyal Order fraternity here in Northern Ireland. And, and it's a way of life. And I'm not going to try to tell you this story. What I will say is that when I was a young man, I was also in these marching bands, and it created a sense of community. And
we've got the video as well, John, by the way.
Sorry?
We've got the video as well.
Good stuff. Okay, Ricky, do you want to play the video before we bring Glenn in, and we'll just go for it? Okay.
Is Glenn in this video?
I don't know. You play it, and we'll have a look.
Beautiful thing. Welcome to the broadcast, Glenn.
All right, nice to meet you.
Yeah, welcome, Glenn. Glenn, thank you for coming on. And I really wanted to scratch this surface because over the years, the marching bands and the Loyal Order fraternity, they've been painted as bad people within the mainstream media, and a lot of the images that people in England and right across other parts of the United Kingdom see is that these activists within the media that have a vested interest in actually running the Loyal Orders and the marching bands down, well, they do it with great effect. So, Glenn, you've got a huge burden on your shoulders here because you're going to show people right now that this isn't the case. I mean, marching bands from your standpoint, Glenn, I heard that you created some music. You're a musician. You're a very good musician. I've just heard you where you're playing flutes, you're playing two different types of flutes, and you're also playing the drums, and you've created this music for yourself. Could you just tell the listeners a wee bit about why you got involved in the marching bands? I mean, what age were you, Glenn, and where did it all start for you?
Thanks for having me on, guys. Really appreciate it. It's great to be able to share the story. I'm just conscious I look like I've had about 20 million sunbeds here in the camera. So, for me, my start with flute bands was way back whenever I was 9 or 10 years old. And I had an experience in what would be just around the corner from where I lived, a place called Tampere Avenue. I grew up in an interface between a Protestant area and a Catholic area. But I arrived here from Canada and, moved in here with the folks and stuff. And then one day my mates come running up we were playing on the street and said, listen, it's the bands. And I initially hadn't a clue, and went out onto the street and was met by this array of color and sound and celebration. And I was just transfixed. Now, it wasn't necessarily the loudest bands and making the biggest record and stuff. I was drawn to a band called the Pride of the Raven, and they would have been what's called here a melody flute band. So they were maybe a wee bit more refined in terms of what they played, and they played counter melodies and parts and stuff, almost like a flute orchestra kind of thing, with different bits and pieces going on. And I was just hooked by the sound of the music. It wasn't necessarily all of the paraphernalia that was going on around it. It wasn't the banners. It wasn't anything else. It was the sound of this band. It was music that first and foremost drew me in to this. And I was like going, you know what? I want to be part of not just a band. I want to be part of this band. And it was a chance encounter with a friend of mine. We were planning to go and play football, and I'd seen one of my mates, a guy called Darren, lives in England now, and I'd sort of said to him, listen, we're going up to Avonil here to play football. Are you going? And he went, no, I'm heading out to band practice. And I was like, oh, all right, hold on a wee second. What band are you in? And he goes, Pride of the Raven. I was like, right, that's it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to band practice with you. So I had a quick conversation with my mum, convincing her that this would be a great idea for me to get involved in a flute band. And my mum's concern was, how much is this going to cost me? So, but that's how I got my start. And we went to a practice, and in this wee hall, you wouldn't even have known that it was there. And that's where I got introduced to a guy called Terry Hamilton, who taught me how to play a flute. So that's where I started. So you're probably talking about 9 or 10 years old.
Yeah. Ricky, I'm going to ask Glenn a question, and I'm going to say something here, and this will lead you. It's also for you, Ricky, so you can answer this in the next breath. But, Northern Ireland's known as one of the most patriotically proud places in the United Kingdom. Glenn here, and people like Glenn, are the reason why that we are as patriotically proud as that we are, is because there's a huge sense of community in Northern Ireland. And the marching band fraternity, I mean, it is those people that create that community. It is the loyal orders that are attached to these bands that create that community. And what they do is they take people off the streets, and they learn young children from small age up how to play musical instruments. And when they're doing that, and when they're going to their band practice, and when they're learning their musical instruments, and when they're marching and so on, and they're part of that community, Ricky, it keeps them off the streets, you see. And when they're doing that, they're not getting, idle hands makes light work for the devil, or makes work for the devil, let's just say. But I mean, I'm trying to explain that in Northern Ireland, there's the marching band fraternity, there's the loyal order fraternity, and there's so many communities, whether that even be the Christian community, right throughout the United Kingdom. Ricky, one thing I will say here, and you could talk to the both of us here, is that within the Loyal Order fraternity, which is attached to the marching band fraternity, and that's the largest Christian organisation on the planet. Did you know that, Ricky?
No.
There you go. So that it actually is, and on a lot of their banners, Glenn will tell you, there's a lot of depictions of things like, maybe biblical things is the reality. So have you any questions for Glenn, Ricky?
Yeah, definitely. I think we see the video footage, we see clips from the marches, but can you tell us, Glenn, that the heart and the soul of these marching bands and what you guys do? Can you tell us the real heart and the soul? What the purpose of when you get together? What is the overriding purpose of what you do?
Well, I think from initially, I would say primarily there is, and it's focused on music. There's a big element of music, and that is preserving a culture and a traditional style of music that is associated with obviously our identity as British citizens and stuff. So but first and foremost for me, it was the music that hooked me, and it was learning to play the instrument that hooked me. But I think a large part of the band scene is focused in around one, protecting a level of our identity, but also to make sure that we proudly promote our identity as well. That there's an element that we're not hiding our identity. It's hard to hide, 30,000 people walking the streets in bright uniforms and so on. You can't hide that level of identity and association and stuff. But I know for me, a lot of the stuff that I know that I'm involved with is primarily about, initially it's the music, and then after that there is other things that come along with that. And I think for me, John, you alluded to just the way that almost the distraction that the bands can be for young people, and that's my experience. I mean, I couldn't escape the troubles, but the band was a distraction from the troubles. It was one of those things. Because the way I talk to people about it was, I look at some of the young people who lived in the area I came from, who are either sadly no longer with us, or they got themselves involved in some stuff that maybe they shouldn't have. Maybe an approach that wasn't really the greatest maybe to take, and as a result of it, it took their lives. But I got myself involved in a band, and for me, I would have went to a practice on a Thursday night, and whenever I started walking with the band, I would have been at practice Thursday night, I'd have been at a parade on a Friday night, a Saturday afternoon, a Saturday evening, more than likely a church parade on a Sunday, and then we practiced again on a Sunday night. So, and then I had BB on a Tuesday night, and I had Scouts on a Wednesday night. So 6 nights out of the week, I was doing something else. I didn't have time to be hanging around and getting involved in stuff, other activities. I was involved, and the majority of that time was spent in the band. And what the band gave me is, I still am a beneficiary of today. I mean, the band gave me communication skills. It enabled me to speak with a wide age range in terms of other members of the community, because you had everybody from 9 years old to 60, 70-year-olds in the band. And that gave me the ability to be able to speak to anybody in my community. And I actually would say that influenced my early career choice in regards to becoming a youth worker. That ability to be able to connect with such a wide range of ages and be able to use that as a method to help young people engage with the wider world around them, and especially through the form of music. And also the fact that I got friends that are still my friends, 35 years later. I have a friendship group there that have been through thick and thin with. And, I've learned how to appreciate music. I've learned how to read music. I play multiple instruments, so that initial influence was extremely positive on me. And I'm reaping the benefits of what the band gave me in those early days. It became an obsession for me. I was absolutely obsessed with, getting out with the band, and learning all the tunes off by heart and stuff. I mean, and wanting to parade and put that uniform on and just be seen in the street and, and be a part of something that people were proud of and everything, so it did so much for me. And that's what, that I suppose has been the inspiration behind the book, and also the podcast that I do. I made the Parade podcast that is about, I talk about changing the narrative and changing the way that people look at this particular element. Because what we have in the band scene here, we have 620 bands in the province.
Right.
And that's upwards of nearly 30,000 plus people are involved in bands and marching bands in Northern Ireland. We're the single biggest voluntary arts sector in the whole of the United Kingdom.
Wow.
And that's something to be proud of. That's something to be shouting about. And we have musicians here. And first and foremost, I want to point out that bands, men and women, are musicians first and foremost. And that's what we need to be seen as. We don't need to be categorized as anything else. We're musicians, and there's nothing wrong with being a musician.
No, Ricky, could you pop that little thing up there from Jim Werner onto the screen where he's at the bands? Now, I wanted to talk about that, and I've heard Gary Lanahan that was on there not too long ago. I mean, Gary's also involved with probably one of the huge big band, and we'll get him to come back and talk about that at some stage. We'll not steal his thunder, but I mean, Gary's band would be like a super band, a crazy big amount of people that's in this band. They'd be like a football match walking down the road is the real thing. But look, I often hear Gary talking about the bands in this way, is that the band, I mean, they put millions of pounds, Jim Werner's saying here, into the economy, which is always overlooked. And let me explain to you. I mean, being involved in these bands, Glenn, and I just listened to you there about you're proud. You just can't wait to get that uniform on, and you feel all proud, and you're marching down the road. I mean, I was I was in bands whenever it was about from 12 years upwards, and I remember putting that uniform on and just couldn't wait to get it on the next time and to get out with the band and feeling the proudness of marching with the band and like that. Yeah, I that's how I was. But one of the things that Jim's saying here, and Gary Linehan often says it, is that what is overlooked is that the amount of money that these marching bands and these loyal orders, they put into the economy. And what they do is that, I mean, they from all over the province, 30,000 people, imagine 30,000 people hiring buses, Ricky, and paying for these buses and going to places and bringing money and buying food and drinks and all sorts of things.
Huge.
And the uniforms, the cost of the uniforms and the cost of the musical instruments, and some of these bands, they maybe have 3 and 4 uniforms, and and if it's it doesn't matter whether it's a big band or not, but some of these uniforms are astronomical amounts of money for just one uniform, and they continuously upgrade themselves, and it's just an industry here in Northern Ireland. And unfortunately, that there was another side of the community, and we'll talk about the agitators on the Republican end of the fence. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to demonize and try to diminish the marching bands and the loyal orders, and they used a lot of propaganda, and they used it successfully in conjunction with their friends in the mainstream media. But Glenn, I'm really glad to see that you've written this book and you do this podcast, and it's called Made to Parade. I'm going to ask you a question here, but I mean, what did you mean when you say made to parade? I mean, surely you weren't. Tell me what it means. What does made to parade mean?
I think for me, I always talk about, there's a strapline on one of the straplines on the front of the book says that on the troubled streets of East Belfast, a young man discovers music, marching, and a new path for life. Whenever I encountered the band, I think that, I found something that I was meant to do. I almost feel like I was destined to be a part of a flute band or be a part of a marching band, and in terms of what that give me, because people don't stick at things. People, in terms of getting commitment to things, that's one thing that we're sadly lacking in terms of, is commitment and dedication and discipline. And for me, I learned all that stuff in a band. I learned how to be disciplined. I learned how to be part of a team. I learned how to, realize where I had my voice and be able to make my voice. And I just feel like that my personality, in terms of the way that I went after becoming a fully fledged member of a band, that you don't put that kind of time and dedication in to something that it doesn't matter to you. It became a passion for me. It became an absolute, as I said before, an absolute obsession for me, in terms of making sure that I knew the tunes. And I mean, my mates would have called for me and everything, and I'd have been blowing them off and going, listen, you know what? I'm not coming out. I need to practice. I need to get, I need to, spend time learning these tunes. And even when I was heading off to Canada to see my family, the first thing that I put in that was trying to put in the suitcase was my flute. I'm taking my flute with me. I'm not, that's what I mean. It's something that I feel like that was inside of me. And just by that chance connection with my mate, saying that he was part of the band that I really loved, it was like, it was meant to be, and I think for me, being involved in a band is something that I just feel like I was made to do, and hence the name Made to Parade and stuff, so it's been absolutely, it's taken me everywhere. I mean, all over the country, all over the UK as well. Do you know what I mean? I've been in lots and lots of places, and there's been opportunities afforded to me that maybe wouldn't have come if I hadn't have been a member of a band either. Do you know what I mean? But it's brought so much to my life, and at times I felt like it was time for a story to be told. I felt like it was time for that narrative to be put out there, because the book itself, there isn't another book like it. There hasn't been a book written from this perspective. When you think of how old the band scene is and how far it goes back, and especially into the military history of Britain, you're talking back into the fife and drum history in terms of what looks like flute bands here, goes way back into the time of Queen Anne, who came after King William and Queen Mary and stuff, and she reorganized the army and used this fife and drum band in order to organize troop movements. And then the regimental bands that came, because the way she set it up was every part of the army had two flutists or two flautists or fifers, whatever you want to call it, and two drummers. And when the regiment came together, they formed a band. And that is the heritage that the bands come from, and that's where this all stems from as well. And I think, that even that rings back to our sense of, of Britishness as well. That the fact that the history and the development of this style of music comes from within the reorganization of the British Army way back in the early 1700s and stuff. So. And that's something I don't think people know either. They don't have that history of it. They don't, connect with that. And suppose that's partly what I see my role as being. I say, you know what? You need to connect with this history. You need to be able to connect with the positive of this. And it's about time there was a really positive story out there about this, not an academic treaty of this kind of thing, or not a sensational, approach to storytelling, and let's take a tragedy and try and put it. It's like going, you know what? This is my experience. This is what I got from being a member of a band. And I'm not always great at quoting the left and stuff, you know what I mean? But they talk about their truth. You know what? This is my truth. Yeah. My truth is that I have had the most positive experience being a member of a marching band, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah, you and 30,000 others that walk the streets of Northern Ireland right now. But one of the things I will say, Ricky, and this is over to you, but are you aware, Ricky, that these marching bands, these same marching bands, they coming from the same sort of, they're made from the same fibre. They walk every year in Southport, isn't it? Close to Blackpool. There's a 12th demonstration there. And, and I know people, Orange Men from right around the United Kingdom, and even in London, they have these bands, and they Ulster bands, the fraternity, they've influenced so many people. In Scotland also has a large marching band fraternity also, of the same sort of caliber. And it's good that you mentioned this, Glenn, that, it does come from the military traditions. And I know that, I listened to some of your podcasts, and I know that's the type of people that you do have on the podcast explaining. Ricky, you're also a musician, something that you don't talk about, but maybe you'd like to sort of explain to people what it is, because you have you're a bedfellow here with Glenn, in the fact that you're a musician, and a very good one too. What is it that you do, Ricky?
So I'm a gospel rock and roll artist. If anyone didn't know that was a thing, it's now a thing. So that's what I do. So you can even find me on YouTube. I'm there if you type my name in, and I minister music to large crowds around the world, really, from Sri Lanka to South Africa to all across the UK to America, and we bring the gospel of Jesus Christ through rock and roll music. But I like the statement that you made, Glenn, which was, it's music first. You're a musician first, before any politics, before anything else. And,
definitely. It's Ricky. The one I'll tell you a story. We do some work with a group called Beyond Skin here, and Beyond Skin are, a community organization that seeks to bring, sort of different cultures and things in terms of exploring, sort of musical diversity and just, enriching your own musical experience and stuff through the arts. And they organized it. And the guy, I have to mention, a guy called Darren Ferguson. Darren Ferguson runs that organization and has done a lot to promote the marching bands in Northern Ireland. He's done an amazing job in regards to, this whole idea of seeing marching bands as musicians. And this particular night, he organised an event in a venue in the Belfast City Centre called the Black Box. And there was two bands on. There was the Shagger Road Defenders and the Ballymacarrat Defenders. And at the end of the night, it was actually one of the first times I actually spoke about the idea that I was writing a book at this event. And at the end of it, this guy came up to me and he says, "It's great to see people like you in here." And I was like, my response to him was, "Why are you surprised to see a musician in a music venue? Is it just because this flute's black and it comes from a particular tradition that you don't see music?" And he took a step back and he just said to me, he says, "You know what? I've never seen it like that before. And that's the strangest thing for me, is that people not seeing people playing flutes and drums and everything as musicians, because for me, music is the conversation. Music starts conversation. Music, is the dialogue, you know what I mean? And that's the thing that I suppose for me with the book as well is, let the music be the dialogue. You want to have a conversation with me about this? Let's talk about the music. Let's talk about the vast repertoire of tunes that my band plays. Let's talk about the fact that we are recreating, movie soundtracks. Let's talk about how we're transforming popular songs that are in the charts and arranging them to be played on flutes. Let's talk about those type of things, rather than coming from the perception that you think that this is sectarian. Why don't you just come at it from a point that this is musicians? And I had this conversation with the Belfast City Council recently as well. And I wrote them a letter, and I'd said to them, I says, listen, you know what? It's been absolutely brilliant during the pandemic how you have recognized all the different art forms and music that's been, portrayed and used throughout the response to COVID. However, I'm very surprised that there's been absolutely no mention of the charitable work that's been done by musicians in marching bands. And I put it down and just said, listen, if you have an issue with that, or is it because you don't have access to this type of stuff? And it opened up a conversation that that I was very willing to have, and they were very receptive to that. And the other thing that they were doing was they were developing a strategy for the development of or a music-based strategy for Belfast as well. And I asked them again, I says, what representation do you have from the marching band fraternity there? Because there's a high level of musicians who are based in this city who would love to be involved in that strategy. And as a result of that, there was some movement in regards to that too. So it's, I think for me, I have to keep going down the line of, this is about music, guys. For me, first and foremost, it's about the music. It's about the effort and the dedication, because the level of skill that exists within the marching band scene here is absolutely amazing. I mean, you have people who are on a level with some of the best musicians in the world who play in our bands here. Do you know what I mean? And when you think of flute players, Ricky, who would you think of?
Flute players.
James Galway.
James Galway. Where did James Galway get a start? In a flute band in Belfast. One of the best flute players in the world got his start in a flute band in Belfast. Do you know what I mean? So these are the type of level of musicians and the influence that the marching band scene has. And I suppose for me, I want to promote that. I want to say that they haven't been great at getting their own story out there because of maybe some of the connotations that come with the scene. But you know what? That's changing. We're changing the narrative. We're changing it around, and we're saying, you know what? This is an extremely positive thing that people are involved in, and it's an extremely positive display of culture, and it's an extremely positive influence on all members of our community.
Yeah. Just in July there, the socially distanced 12th, whenever the bands were coming to you and you weren't going to the bands, there's a whole different thing happened this year, Ricky. Normally there's 12th demonstrations all around the province, and thousands upon thousands of people, and the tourism that it actually brings to Northern Ireland is colossal. But this year, I had the privilege of having a socially distanced event in Ballymoney, County Antrim, with a guy called Professor John Tong from the University of Liverpool. He's a professor of politics. And last year, John went to the 12th demonstrations in Southport. And this year, he joined us in Ballymoney. And I have to say, John and another professor that he works with, a lady called Marissa McGlinchey, they thoroughly enjoyed the day out, and they couldn't believe, the sense of community, the turnout of the bands, the quality of the music, the quality of the melody bands. And, and I can remember writing a social media post, and saying that, and I pictured a band, actually took a small video of it, Glenn, and I wrote a post saying, this is what honourable is, because they're totally honourable and respectable, and they mean nobody any harm, even though that some bands have been painted, by those with vested interest as a bad thing, but they're definitely not a bad thing. As we've explained, they do very, very good work within the community, and over the entirety of this COVID process. I mean, bands have teamed together, and they've used their organisations and the people within the bands to deliver food parcels to the elderly, to help out in the community, to ensure that people were looked after in these times of crisis. So that's what the marching bands do. And I know they do a lot of charity work. I know they do collections. And I know that what they do is they use that money for the betterment of their communities and to ensure that people that are in need, well, they don't go without. So if you tell me that's a bad thing, if anybody wants to say that's a bad thing, I don't know what a good thing is, Glenn. I don't know what a good thing is.
And I think you think you're right, John. I think it's about time the bond scene started, piping up a bit more about the great stuff that they do. Yeah. And I know my bond this year, the Pride of the Raven, I mean, we raised around about, even without the ability to have what would be called our charity parade, we raised over £2,000 in a short period of time for the chest, heart and stroke charity and stuff, so, and that was in relation to a member of our band lost their sister, and the band decided that they wanted to raise funds for chest, heart and stroke. And our band over the years, we've been involved in charity work way back from sort of 1983, 84. We've raised over £150,000 in charity over a long period of time, and it's an integral part of what we do, and being able to give back to our community, because the community supports us, and and they get behind us, and we wouldn't exist without the generosity at times, because let's face it, I mean, these bonds are self-funded. We're not receiving money from anywhere. We're raising this money ourselves. You talked about, the cost of uniforms. I mean, I'm sitting, with a number of flutes here. My flutes cost me £400 and £500 a touch. I mean, that's not cheap for an instrument. You're talking £300, £400 for drums, and up to, or maybe £600, £700, £800, sometimes more for a uniform. Some bands are kitting themselves out to the tune of, £90,000 to £150,000 for a uniform, and that's, the amount of the work that the bands do to fund themselves is absolutely amazing. And for me, I'm still an addict. Do you know what I mean? I'm still obsessed with bands, and I'll do whatever I can to promote that.
Glenn, I would like to first thank you for coming on, because it's been very enlightening, and it's helped us here from a Northern Ireland perspective actually explain to people that would have seen maybe marching bands as what the media paint them as. And I can tell you, the people in England, the people all around the United Kingdom that doesn't know what marching bands is, this is exactly what marching bands is. Now, I'm on to one more question, and then we'll close with you, Glenn, but thank you very much for coming on. You played a tune called Road to the Isles. It's one of my favourite tunes when I was a young man. And I'm assuming that the history of that song, I mean, this is only me assuming, you probably know a lot more about it than me, that it's a Scottish connection, has it, because of the Isles.
Yeah.
One thing, I'm going to ask you a question, because I see that somebody actually had asked you to do that, but you said that you'd flutes hanging around. Is there any chance that you could sort of stand back from your mic and just give us a little blast of Road to the Isles? Would you do that for us?
I'll see what I can do here. I made it behind me here.
That's good. Ricky, stand back from your mic a wee bit. We just want to show people that you are a musician and you're a proper musician.
There you go.
Thanks very much, Glenn. Thank you. Glenn, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for coming on, and hope that you're no stranger. I hope that you'll come on the feed again. And if you know anybody, because I know that you work in around the sort of Shankill Road, and I know that you do a lot of good for the community. Your job takes you into those areas. So if you know any worthy people that wants to come on our stream and give an account of what they're doing or whatever, please feel free to welcome them, because this is what people need to know. They need to know that there's communities right around the United Kingdom, and sometimes they get a bad press, but the reality is that they're decent, salt of the earth type people that do good within the community. And I'll say one thing before we'll slow down, Ricky, and you can say thank you to Glenn. But Our only crime is loyalty. Loyalty to what? Loyalty to want to be British. Loyalty to the United Kingdom. If anyone's going to hold this United Kingdom together, I can say something, Ricky, and this is me being biased, but you know something? Ulster men need to lead the way. Thanks very much for coming on. Ricky, would you just like to?
Yeah. Thank you again, Glenn. Just exactly like as John said, and just that small piece you played for us, it touches somewhere deep down. You know, it really touches somewhere deep down. And you said something important, that music is a language that speaks to everybody, and it's true. It transcends generations. It transcends race. It transcends religion, and it can speak to all of the people of the United Kingdom, if not the world. So thank you for your music. And definitely we'd love to continue working with you, have you on the show. And as soon as we can start doing rallies and getting things together, definitely we need to work together. We need to do everything we can to get you guys out more into the public, wherever we are. We need you guys.
Just on one subject there is that we were actually contemplating doing a rally. Okay, COVID has actually put this down. And one of the things we talked about was getting a marching band, and they wanted one of our marching bands. It was a rally for conservatism. It was going to be in London. And now we've got a booking agent. We've got Glenn, because Glenn could bring the Pride of the Raven to play in front of the British people from right around the United Kingdom, and to be on the stage and show what it means to be made the parade. Glenn, thank you very much. Thank you.
Guys, thank you. Appreciate it.